What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, saying you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. You can touch base with me at, a number of different things. I'm on Periscope tonight. I'm on Blab, and also you can catch me at the Dr. Vibe show. And near the end of the conversation tonight, we will give you some other platforms that you can catch the Dr. Vibe show. Very happy to have people jumping on, which is really good. And our conversation tonight is Are Black Men at War? And it's a very open topic. Maybe Black men are at war with maybe themselves, with their families, with society, with media. But we want to know if Black men are at war. And our first friend to come on tonight is Vashard Dobbins. What is up, Vashard?
Hey, how you doing? I'm doing well. Glad to be on.
Good. Thank you so much for dropping by. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfect.
So when the question comes to you, are Black men at war, what do you think about? Or how does that pertain, or what are your thoughts?
The first thing I think about are police brutality. I think of gun violence. I think of drugs. I think of fatherless homes. I think of a myriad of things that pertain to our community, so to say. And when I say our community, I don't mean that it's just a Black community. I'm just saying any community that has a Black man in it. So that would be most urban communities across America. So I think of a myriad of things. I think of a lot of problems that we have, from incarceration. I think of job rates. I think of contracts. This topic is so explosive. I would love to say, yes, Black men are at war, but we have to define what at war means. So I think we need to section that according to either topic or subject, or if you want to make a broad appeal for what's happening in our social world.
Well, you know what? With my conversations, I steer the ship. You guys drive the ship. So whatever area you want, you shared a myriad of different subjects and topics. Whatever you want to start at, no problem, because I'm not a one and done individual. There can be part 2, part 3. Not everything has to be in one composed conversation. So wherever you want to start, where you think Black men are at war. Well, let's put it this way. Are they at war? And then pick an area where you think they're at war at or in, and we can drill down and expound on that conversation.
I think definitely Black men are at war. Now, who are we at war with is the question. So I don't even think it's debatable whether or not we're at war. We're certainly at war. And we first have to change ourselves. And I can preach hope and inspiration and challenge as well. I'm a father. I've got 4 sons. My first responsibility is my household. It's my wife. It's my children. So before Black men blame anybody, we must first hold ourselves accountable. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't issues outside of us, but within ourselves, we have to make sure that we're walking the line that God has intended and the law is intended in general. I want to talk a bit about incarceration rates. Now,
sure.
I obviously know that the rate of plutonic. America incarcerates almost 25% of the world's prisoners here in the United States of America. But yet, when you look at only 325 million out of about 7.4 billion planet, that is a ridiculous rate. Obvious that has been a slave type of mentality, mindset as it relates to incarceration. A lot of it has to do with the lack of education. They're now building prisons on the scores of 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders because if you can't read, you really can't. Anyway, so a lot of those steer our Black men for drugs, alcohol, various ways to make your money. And, well, that's one aspect. And then the other aspect is fatherless homes. When you're less likely to have an education, you're less likely to see the benefit of really not only having a father, but being a father and staying the course. Because life is tough in general, but staying the course is what it's going to take to turn it around. We've got to first hold ourselves accountable and then from there, at the same process, move forward to our society in general. That was a mouthful.
Okay, good stuff. No problem. Just a few things. I don't know if it's you, but you're very low. Your audio is very, very low.
Is it okay?
That's better. That's better. Tony Lewis, welcome. Man,
Hey.
Rise Up, welcome. Now, Tony, can you possibly turn down the TV in the background because it's really loud?
I'll go ahead and get to it.
Something
Hold
going
on.
on. Yeah, because it's really loud and it's making it difficult for even myself to hear, and any people who are on or listening, it's difficult for them. So it's a little bit of a distraction. Okay, so what I'm going to do, and Tony,
Is that better?
okay, it's better, but you're okay. You're frozen a little bit, but you're frozen. I don't know if your internet connection is the best, but we'll work with it. So, Tony, thank you for joining the conversation. Ed, thank you so much for joining the conversation. I had a feeling that Man Rise Up would be on tonight, so there you go. I would think that this title would bring on the heat in a good way.
Absolutely. All right.
Tonight. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go in order. Tony, what do you think when you hear the question, are black men at war?
Well, I think that my thing is, first of all, I think we have lost our identity. And sometimes we don't realize who we really are and what are we capable of. So sometimes the frustration in life is not because of other people, it's just because we just don't know ourselves and what direction or what the things that we want to do. And when we find ourselves lashing out or look like we're always angry or upset or things just don't go right, and it's not just the environment only, it's just sometimes it's just a self-inventory and getting to know who we are.
Okay. I'll also present the same conversation piece to Man Rise Up. When you hear the question, are black men at war, what comes to your mind?
Mic check. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
I hear you just fine.
So, yeah, Brother Tony just nailed it. And that was when Brother Vinchard was speaking about the various external things that we're at war with. I concur with those. But I think the more basic element is exactly what Tony hit on, is that we are at war with ourselves more so than anything else. And I say that from a placement of my own journey. Before I became the founder of Man Rise Up, I found myself floundering through society because I had actually lost touch with not only who, but whose I am, the royalty that I represent, and the actual value that even as a black man in this society that I am subjected to on a regular basis. But I often had relinquished my power by blaming the external things around me, because growing up on the west side of Detroit in the midst of prostitution, drug dealing, gang banging, pimps, players, and I start to think about, well, how does that affect the dynamic or the mindset? And if you never see anything beyond that, and by the grace of God, I was able to see things beyond that. But in the midst of that, I was on the fence and I lost myself. I lost focus despite my parents having both of them in the home, but I still lost myself in all of the various distractions. So I think the war is multifaceted, as is it Vinchard pointed out?
Yes.
As Vinchard pointed out, it is multifaceted, and some of the recidivism and various other topics that you mentioned are absolutely valid, but I think it starts with us and the absence of us knowing exactly who we are, whose we are, and the royalty that we represent. So this is going to be a great conversation tonight, y'all.
How do you think with that?
I figured out because first of all, there's men in the house. And just by our very presence makes it going to be an awesome thing.
That's right.
Excellent. I'm getting some echoing from you, Tony. I think it's your laptop or someone's. I'm getting echoing, and I have a feeling it's from Tony, but it's gone now. Okay, good. Let's drill down further, and hopefully you gentlemen can be transparent. How much has your upbringing or the way you were raised helped or hindered you for the war?
I think all of it would help, even if there were negative internal or external circumstances. I'll take myself for an example. I'm a native of Texas. We lived in several different cities. I didn't grow up with my natural father. I grew up with my stepfather. His lifestyle. I hope you guys can hear me.
I can hear you. I'm just getting some echoing periodically from somewhere. So hopefully,
I think it's me.
yourself.
I think it's me, Dr. Bob. Let me fix it.
Okay, no problem. Keep on going, Rashard.
So basically, what I learned, having grown up in a household with a stepfather who was both physically and verbally abusive within the home, I learned what to do and what not to do. And because of that, I have passion to be a leader in my home and to be a leader the right way. My stepfather was also incarcerated as well. He was also an alcoholic as well. And you would think that that's, strong plight, but those were used as motivation for me. But now, how do you just use that as motivation? Well, I had to not only learn what not to do, but I had to coach and mentor other men. All of those men were not African American. Some of those men were Caucasian coaches, just people that love me in general. I think the church played a major institution in me and my family. But I want to say that your upbringing brings a lot of pain and power. You determine whether or not you want to make purpose. We can make a problem a promise. We can make persecution something prophetic that pushes you into where God really wants you to be. But what we're tasked to do as leaders on this call is get the people who are in between, especially the children.
That's right.
Okay, Tony, how did your being raised as a young black man either help or not help you for the war?
Well, I would like to say that also coming from a single family home and having a stepfather in the present home, it was always work ethic driven, education driven, do good and good would always prosper. So coming to college and being on my own and doing different stuff, I've always been blessed to have men around me, and I've always been able to have men in different aspects or different times in my life to help motivate me. And I learned that because I never had my biological father, so I had no excuse, because I had a mother that was very driven and real driven for my education and very direct about how you learn things, that environments can change things and the way you see it, but there's always going to be someone that can help you if you open yourself up to get the help. So I don't use excuses to say that there is no way to be a better man or better father when there's always some kind of example somewhere around, if I could just be transparent and open to myself to get the help. So preparation for me, I was a single father, took care of my son from 3 years old to 18. He's in college now. And the driving force behind that was to the point that I had no excuse. Just because I didn't have a father, I couldn't raise my son any better than my situation, because it's always had men to show me what I was doing, even though I didn't have a father for my own self. And I used some of the nuggets. I took some of those nuggets, like they say in church. I'm a pastor also, a minister also. Eat the meat, throw away the bones. So you always gain knowledge from something. Let it work for you. And then what don't work, you put it aside. So that's how I raised myself, raised my son. And I could say I'm happily blessed and highly favored right now, just to be around other black men and just be who I am. So they prepare me how to deal with people.
Good stuff. Man Rise Up, how did your being raised either help or not help you prepare for the war?
So it's a very, and it's Dr. Ed. So Man Rise Up is the organization, is Ed. So the response to the question at hand is I had a mixture. So growing up, I had a father that was present, that was an amazing provider. However, there was a void in the emotional connectivity that Tony spoke to. Really one of the only really positive, engaged male influences growing up were my basketball coaches, even more so than my dad. My dad was a great, great provider. And I didn't realize until I was well into my 30s that my dad had issues that he was dealing with as having been adopted. So you can't give what you don't have. He was an amazing example of hard work. He was an amazing example of discipline. He was very structured. He was highly decorated as a Detroit police officer. And I say this with all due respect, he was an emotional retard. He had no skills to be emotionally connected. Therefore, I came up emulating my dad, and I became an emotional retard as an adult. And I say that in all transparency because that took me into, as I shared last night, a lot of not feeling like I fit in. I was always driven. I was always an academic. I was always a power athlete, but it was all about the production. But there was very little sensitivity to the emotional aspects of life in general. It wasn't about emotions. It was about win, fix it, until I lost everything through the journey of attempted suicide, through crack addiction. And not until I came back from being broken did I begin to rebuild as an adult. So now that I'm rebuilding, I have the spiritual core that Vinshard and Tony alluded to as a core piece of my life. So I've had both sides of that fence, and now I have a new intentional circle of individuals that do understand the benefits of spirituality, the benefits of having mentors, coaches, colleagues of influence around you. So I can say honestly that I've actually walked on both sides of that fence. And today that's part of why Man Rise Up even exists, is to stand in the gap for those men that are not being provided that male role model, be it biological or otherwise.
I'm gonna take the next conversation based on a comment that Veronique Vintag is saying. I see life is a fight. We are always at war. So let me ask you, gentlemen, how do you feel a black man's war is different than others' wars?
Ooh. Man, that's a loaded one.
You know, I'm not joking around, gentlemen. How do you feel a black man? Someone's phone is going off. Is a black man's war different, and how is it different than others?
It's totally different. It's totally different. I'll break protocol and just tell you the hunt is on. Veronica, if you've seen the movie Menace to Society, well, you'd have to take a look at it. I don't know if you fellows remember the movie Menace to Society when he said,
"Sure,
the hunt is on," because first off, I have a college degree. Praise the Lord. I am a minister, preacher, father, husband. All of that's really good. But typically, if I'm on the street, shirt, hat, jeans, etc., to a police officer, to society in general, I basically see as a potential suspect. Now, is that racist or not? Is that profiling? Most times it is profiling. Is it racist? I don't necessarily think so on every hand, but the majority of our prisons have been filled with black men in America. If you're in the United States of America, if you're watching any other country, I can't fully speak to that. So because we make up the majority of prisons here in the United States of America, it's a indirect psychological mindset to say there is a possibility that a black man will commit a crime. That's just one example. If you look at the loan rate, whether it's homes, same credit scores, our approval rates are lower. If you look at job applications, our hiring, us getting hired, it's just lower. It's just an automatic fact. When you look at basic stats, now, do we have an African American president? Yes. Praise God, it's a blessing. Is that an excuse? No, it's not an excuse. Do what you're supposed to do. Aim high for the sky. But to be candid with you, you will have to prove that you are not like a lot of other African American men in our society. You will have to prove that you are trustworthy, that you are noble, that you are commendable, that you're not going to commit a crime, and that you can be loyal and trusted. It's just a fact. I'm sorry. Brothers, help me. Am I off?
No, you're on point. You're on point. And you want to get some of that, Tony? I'll be courteous of the order.
But let me get the question. Let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and say that question one more time. Can we hear that question one more time?
The comment that was made by Veronique Vintag was, I see life is a fight. We are always at war. How is the war different for Black men?
We always going to be at a war until we find that inner peace. You got to remember, I am a pastor, a minister, also pastor, family man, and a household of boys. I always tell them we got to think. We have a tendency of reacting. I hate to make it sound weak, but sometimes we are emotional. Just as, even though we're men, supposed to be strong, we're still emotional, and our emotional sometimes is taken out of context for just. I'm Black, so I could just go ahead and do this because it's okay, but it's not okay. Sometimes we use that as an excuse just to do what we want to do and act out, and then say, well, all Black men act this way. No, we still got to think. We still got to reason. We still got to look sometimes more than just within our family. We got to look down the road what this consequences or circumstances is going to lead for not just me, but also my family. So the war is real. The point is how we react to it. It's a hard question, man. Even though I'm a minister, it's a hard question because I'm still human. And when I'm still human, sometimes I'm still going to be looked at to the contents of what my skin are versus what's on the inside of me, what's my thought process. My degree is not walking on my face or my ear or my back. So someone say, oh, he is an educated fool, so he might act a little different. Or we just act foolish because sometimes that's how people look at us as. So the war is real, but it's how we respond to it. And that question is like, it's not hard, but it is hard to answer that question because we still fight no matter how much good we do. They say evil is always present. Trust me, at any given time, the best man can react the wrong way, and they could forget about all the good that he's done, and the evil thing would stand out for the rest of his life. So that's where I'm at.
All right, Dr. Ed, how do you feel about the conversation?
The war for Black men starts well before a lot of the topics that have been discussed, and having men as my specialty, actually have done some study on it. As Bashan pointed out earlier, there's this I lost the term. At the third grade, prison industrial complex that starts at the third grade score, or from the evaluation of third grade scores. But it goes even before that. It has an impact from childhood, where if you are not provided with early childhood care, proper early childhood care, you start out life behind the curve. And so because the cost of daycare or the proper early childhood care is not affordable for most African Americans, even some in the middle class, myself at the time when I had children daycare age, my wife and I at that time had to make the decision, do we both go to work, or do one of us go to work and the other stay home, because trying to pay for daycare was pretty much a wash. And we had moved away from our respective hometowns, so we didn't have the option of taking them to grandma or somebody like that. We had to pay for it. And so when you don't have that early childhood care, the cycle starts there. And then that stigma, that inability to learn, that inability to be exposed to quality learning, first of all, because our schools have failed us. And I'll go on record and defend that to the hilt. Our school systems are not designed in a way to have the African American as a priority. Most of the materials are outdated and inaccurate. And so we are not even equipped from an early age with the necessary tools. I now live in a suburban area. I have lived in the suburbs for quite a few years. And I'm a product of the inner city of Detroit on the west side. And by the grace of God, I went to Detroit public schools up until high school. And then I went to a Catholic school where I saw a whole different dynamic of what was being given to us as a learning tool. I do not have a college degree, although I am Dr. Ed Womack by paper. But it was only through diligence of reading on my own and going outside of the box. So the war for Black men, to go back to the topic, I'm going to behave again, Dr. Vibe. But the war is real because, one, while the cards are stacked against us in a number of ways, when I look at drugs in the environment that I grew up in, I think about, okay, how many Black people I know that got planes, ships, and other means to even get that crap into my neighborhood? And it puts put there as what I believe is a genocidal plan or plot that was intentional. So I think a lot of those things that are poured into our neighborhoods, into our communities, not as an excuse, but the reality is we didn't put them there. We don't have the means to keep them there, but we impart in them or partake in them. And then that distracts us because literally, as you start at an early age, like I did, I started drinking and smoking marijuana at about 11 years old. Not proud of that, but that's the reality. And what that does is no matter how much training pouring into me that there might have been, I could not function at optimal levels because that was a distraction that was there and that was a choice. I'm not making an excuse, but so the war of the Black man is definitely impacted by our upbringing. We are products of our society, our environment, but we do have choices. And a lot of us don't step outside of what's comfortable to take advantage of some of those choices because, again, we've lost sight of our true value, our true worth, and the contributions that we make to this society. So I'll keep it short to share the platform. But don't get me started.
No problem. I have a feeling you already have, so that's no problem. But interesting that Claude Diamond brings up a very interesting point, and it's still on point, but a little bit off it. He says that aren't we responsible for our children's education? Isn't blaming government learning institutions the easy way out? And I was going to get to this in that how much of the responsibility goes to the home environment. So I would like each one of you gentlemen to say how much of it has to do with the home compared to what's going on outside the home in regards to being at war.
Sure. Now, I want to go back to the war portion because when you're in a war, you're constantly getting bombed on. You're constantly having to find new ways to arm yourself. So certainly education is a tool to arm yourself, for you to arm your family. And it is solely the responsibility of those of us who are going to be parents to train our children the way that they should be trained and put them in the best educational system possible. That's our responsibility. But it certainly doesn't mean that we shouldn't hold programs, especially state funded.
I'm gonna have you interrupt. I'm gonna interrupt you just for a second, Dr. Ed. If you are typing, can you put yourself on mute because we can hear every pound of the key going on there. No problem. Keep on going, Mr. Dobbins.
To briefly say that doesn't mean that we shouldn't hold our state accountable, our local government accountable, because that's part of the reason that you're not only paying taxes and there are specific programs within each state to make early childhood available as well as education in general. Obviously, it's up to the parents to do the best that they can. Everybody cannot afford a certain level of daycare. And so if you miss the early childhood, then now by the time they start kindergarten, they're already behind. So I certainly agree with Dr. Ed, which that's mistake number one. If we would put childhood a greater emphasis within that, as opposed to fighting wars overseas, which is a whole nother topic, we would have a greater impact on not only Black men, all kinds of men. Veronica, I believe she said she was Russian. And there may be various listeners or viewers that are on that this is not just an African-American fight, But when it comes to the African or the black man in general, if we don't stand up for ourselves, there aren't specific programs that are validating the fight that we have to fight. And sometimes it's a pretension to say, okay, you know what? I'll say this briefly. I was watching the Democratic debate the other day, and both Hillary Clinton as well as Bernie Sanders said that they really don't know what it's like to grow up in that kind of environment, or to experience some kind of bias, so that they don't have an identification with it. That's step number one, is admitting that you cannot identify with it. But the majority of our time spent in America is just trying to prove that the war on black men is really real.
Okay. Who wants to join that piece?
Well, I would go ahead and say that the educational piece is very important in the household. And what I would wish that, I wish that some of our parents would do the check and balance thing. School is different now from when it was in 1970, when I grew up. It's different from when it was in the early 80s. We think that when we go to the school, we send our kids to school, we think that the teacher knows it all, and that's their responsibility to teach our kids. And sometimes we don't even know they got homework. We don't attend PTAs. We don't do all the other stuff as requirement for parents to keep up with what's going on in the system and what's going on with the change within the educational process. I remember when I got home as a young man, before I could even go outside, homework had to be checked and balanced. And sometimes if I didn't have homework, we had to read the newspaper, had to read an article and tell what's that all about before we even went outside. And coming from if you have a strong educational background where things are different, my parents' time is different than mine, so they saw the importance of education, so they stressed that through the household. We need to do the same thing and pick up the strap and tighten up our boots and teach our kids even more and be more drive them to want to do more than what we're doing. Drive them to have the same education and want to do more on their own. I had a young man, my son loved to read, but he won't read on his own. I had to make him read. When I say read, I mean read anything. It didn't matter, whatever you had an interest in, read more about it, because when you go to school, they're limited to a certain criteria or a curriculum that they set forth for our kids and nothing more. And it limits them. So we are, as parents in the backbone, have to constantly drive education and make them be aware of more than just what the school is offering.
Okay, good stuff. I'm going to put it out there. If anyone wants to join the conversation and wanting to take a seat, you're more than welcome. I just want to shout out to a few people here at Silver Serenite, also at Daniel Boos, also, of course, at Claude Diamond. Thank you so much. Also at Gracie 2, also at H2 Jennings, of course, at Healer Ava Laura, also at Brett 3 Will Reed. Who else we got on here? At Boardman LITS, sorry. At Patrice 713 at Streaming Voice, and also finally at Chastity Fender. So thank you, everyone. I make it a common and regular practice to shout out everyone who takes time out of their positive, productive schedule to join the conversation. If you want to take a seat, just type it out in the comments section and we will get a place for you. In regards to war,
Dr. Vibe, if I could I get a piece of that last? I was trying to wait patiently on that last response.
Sure, no, go ahead.
I was actually dialoguing with Brother Claude Diamond, and I definitely wanted to respond.
Yeah. Sure.
And I apologize for interrupting my typing. That's what I was doing. I was responding to the conversation in the chat room. But relative to the question of how education or should education be the responsibility of the parent, absolutely it should. But you can't give what you don't have. And if you were not equipped with that, because as you look at the dynamic of today's parent, first and foremost, the adage that I grew up with, which was go to school so you can get a good job go to school, get good grades so you can get a good job is now a lie. And that's not necessarily the truth, because I know some brilliantly talented people that have advanced degrees and can't find a job. And so let's also get it straight that education is not the sole responsibility of the school system. So I hope I didn't give the impression that that was what I believed in or felt, because I certainly don't. I don't use excuses. Excuses are monuments of nothingness. And those who choose to use these tools of incompetence very rarely accomplished anything. So I certainly am not a proponent of shoving responsibility off onto the system, if you will. But I also am a realist and understand that if, in fact, you are not equipped with education, as Tony pointed out, or the wherewithal to understand the value thereof, you cannot very well impart that upon your children. And so with regard to education, because it is key, it is king, and especially in this global society that we're now growing up with relative to the war, going back to the earlier point of not having that early childhood input, it stymies, not an excuse, not a justification, but the reality is we all, and that's part of the reason that myself, my network are trying to stand in the gap and pour into those individuals that are less fortunate, that may not have parents that are capable of being that beacon of guidance in the home, which is why we see a lot of the acting out of our younger generation, because they don't have the structure and guidance. These kids are actually dying for structure, discipline. And when I go to an event, a networking event, or I go to an empowerment event, I see like a 90% to 10% ratio of women versus men. Another reason for Man Rise Up doing what we do. But again, as men, we are definitely responsible, but we got to step up to the plate and be, as Tony pointed out, we need to be present at PTA meetings. We need to go have a conversation with the teachers that do get to teach our kids, but also be encouraging and actually go back to school ourselves, continue to learn so that we can help our kids. So I definitely believe it is our responsibility ultimately. I am a fervent believer in continuous learning, and learning happens everywhere, not just in the school.
Okay, good stuff. I'm gonna continue on, and again, thanks for everyone who's contributing to the conversation. This is really good. In the circles that you travel, men, do Black men express how challenging the war is, and have you encountered Black men that have quit the battle?
Yeah,
Yes.
I've encountered Black men who quit.
Yes.
And one of the things, I started preaching in the prisons at about 20 years old. I wasn't in prison, but I had a passion to go in and pull out the greater purpose within people who had, of what I felt like were issues or problems early on. And you can look in a man's eye and know when he's quit. And so in a lot of my circles, there were people who were educated who didn't see a need to go into the prisons and pull trash or pull treasure out of trash, I would say. But there was so much treasure in that. And speaking of PTA, I used to be the president of the PTA association for my son's elementary school. It was amazing how when they saw a Black man coming through, eyes, respect, it was amazing. So when we stand up and do what we're called to do, there's a whole nother respect level. But getting through that and just having the gusto to say, I'm going to change the opinion, takes some work. But some circles, men are quiet. They don't say much because there are things that are happening. Let's say, oh, they're just making an excuse. Oh, we have a Black president, or everybody's created equal, or I didn't experience what they experienced. So what happens with a lot of, I think it was Dr. Ed talking about the emotional retardation. You were respectfully saying it as it relates to your father, but it was for most generations, I would say, especially for the men who were 60 and older. If your father is 55, 60 and older, it was certainly that era where you didn't say much and you took a lot. And taking a lot has put us in hospitals. It's put us in prisons. It's pushed us away from marriages. It's pushed us into depression and a psychological habit of defeat, because this pile just keeps piling and piling and piling. And sooner or later, you keep sweeping it under the rug, you're going to trip over it. Anyways, that's my thought. I won't take it further.
Other two gentlemen, go ahead.
Hey, Vashad, you said exactly what I was getting ready to say about sweeping stuff under the carpet. I think as Black men, we are seen to be strong, and we carry this fortitude about we're supposed to have everything right. But when things are not going right, and as a lack of stating, when they can't get right, when things can't get right, we just exist. And existing means you just know what day it is. You know exactly what you're going to do tomorrow. You know what you're going to do every hour, every minute. And then you go back to sleep and start the cycle all over again. You never try to find a way to break the cycle. And what's a bad thing is when you're married and you existing, of course, you know, Christmas, you know, Valentine's, you keep up with all the good stuff, but you don't really know how to really break the cycle and say, baby, I love you, or kids have a great day, because you down in the dump. So we just sweep everything under the carpet, and then we die, because we're never to the point that we break our pride. We never break our pride and say, I need help. Let me talk to Vashad. Let me talk to Dr. Vibe. Let me talk to somebody else, as another African American or anybody else who could probably bring us out of that pit of confusion, loneliness, depression. And then we get to the point that when there's no hope, we don't even feel good no more. We just waiting for the time to go by that we can be called in. And then we just leave our kids with nothing else other than good memories, bad memories, some of the good times and bad times. And so we've been dead and we're still living.
Dr. Ed.
Yeah. So I think that the responsibility again comes back to, and I want to clean up what I said about my dad being an emotional retard, because actually Rashad, he nailed it. It was the era in which he was reared. And so his mindset was to provide. And so and like I mentioned, he was an awesome provider. And so I meant absolutely no disrespect. I was just being transparent that it was not natural for a man. And even now, it's not natural, be they black, white, Chicano, or whatever. It's not natural for men to be communicators or to outwardly speak. So let's untwist that. And to Veronique, I have traveled the world and I do have a global perspective. I certainly don't make excuses. It just so happens that the topic for tonight is relative to Black men. No disrespect meant, but there are some people on this call that are very well versed in other cultures in the world. In fact, I am very well versed, and in fact, in part in my programming, how we need to take example of that global impact around us to better ourselves, because there's a statistic that says that we are a $1.7 trillion industry within our own community. And if we were to take that, we would become the 16th largest nation in the world. So I don't definitely have a global perspective, but tonight's topic is specific to Black men. So it's not a matter of us being limited. It's a matter of us staying focused. But anyway, back on point. But because I didn't want somebody see that thread and wonder what was going on there. But I am very much a proponent of education, very much a proponent of the fact that we have to begin to take ownership where we're at. And one of the things with the millennials of Black culture is we have to understand that the traditional methods that have been used are not relevant, they're not functional, and that is part of the reason we see a lot of things playing out. That's a large reason why we see that we have a projection of 1 of 3 Black men will become incarcerated over the course of their life. When you understand or have those type of dynamics that you're plagued with, how are you supposed to expand your thinking? How are you supposed to be a proponent or a contributor? And again, not an excuse, but merely the reality of fact. So it's our job as leaders, starting with the leaders on this call and those that are tuned in, to be able to spread the message of worth, the message of value, be able to be creative, be there. And as I don't remember if it was Tony or Vinchard that said, when a Black man shows up, the whole dynamic changes. We don't have to open our mouth. If we just show up, the dynamic changes. And so that in and of itself is significant, and it's something that we're missing the ball on, because as I mentioned earlier, far too often I'm out and about networking and I see a bunch of women. The women are getting it. 77% of single parent homes are run by women. And kudos to those women that are doing a fantastic job of running the home. But the reality is, if you kill the man, you kill the family. Period, point blank. That's biblical. And so that is what's really playing out as the real crux of the war, is we've lost sight of the basics. I mean, we put all these different terms and nice things around it. The real key is the basics have been forgotten and lost sight of. And that is that we are, according to my favorite book, the #1 bestseller on the planet, we are supposed to be the head and not the tail, the head of the household, but it's not something that we can simply take. We can't just take it and it's not given. We have to earn it through our behavior, our obedience, and our adherence to the spiritual principles that are captured inside of the basic instructions before leaving Earth, which I choose to call the Bible.
Okay, before we move on, I'm just going to catch up on some of the comments going on the side here. At Boardman TS, sitting down with the presidents of corporate companies you work for and pointing out their wrongs is how I got all the brothers paid in 1995 with time off for the Million Man March. That is how change comes about. That's standing up. Let me see. I've got
Not if you don't.
Veronica Vintag saying, guys, just inspire others to be more like you. The world will be a better place. IA Lewis says, top, not the bottom. So there we go. So, Tony, haven't heard from you in a bit. What do you have to share?
Well, I think that we got to, man, like Mind Rise Up said, we got to understand that we're a spiritual being. And if we understand our roles, and I'm not gonna go straight to the Bible. I'm going to be in the Bible. If we understand our roles, that we're here to have dominion, and understand what dominion means, it doesn't mean just control of something else. We have to first have control of ourselves. Then when we get control, come in direct alignment with the Word, and understand who we are and what are we supposed to do, we'll take a stand for everything else because we know we're in control of it. The Lord tells us to go out and be fruitful and multiply, but we can't be fruitful and multiply just with any and everybody. He didn't tell us to go out and do it with the beast. He had to make us enough sense to know we had to go find someone suitable or just like us to be fruitful and multiply. So it gives us time to understand who we are. And sometimes we misguide ourselves by not really thinking that because the way life has started off for us, that's the way it's going to be because of the beginning. But we have an opportunity to change things at any given time when we totally decide to surrender and realize it's more than just where I came from. It's more than just the environment I'm in right now. It's more than just what my mama, daddy, and sister them said. What more can I do to make it better, especially when you know of your history? When I say your history, not just Black history, white history. I mean, when you know your family history, you know the origin, the background of your backbone, and want to do better. And it's one thing I really don't like is when you get to family gatherings and you hear people say, "Oh, you act just like your uncle," or "You act just like your cousin," or "You act like this one." And when you realize what they're comparing you to is probably someone who was not motivated to do much more in their life. And then you have to figure out what are they talking about. If you really want to know what they're talking, you got to figure it out or ask the question. So while you're asking that question, you have to ask your question, what can I do to change that chapter in my life? And that's things that we have to soul search. Sometimes we have the best readers, the best educators, the best businessmen, but they're crappy husbands and they're crappy people within themselves when they're not in the spotlight. How do you handle the stuff when you're not
Wow.
in the spotlight and still be a good man all the way around?
Sounds like you're hitting some serious points there, my man. Good thought process. Anyone want to add to what Tony just said?
I think it's excellent.
Very well done. So, gentlemen, I want to look at how do you see the war affecting young black men?
Yeah.
How do you see affect young black men? And Vashar, you have 4 sons,
Four
am I
sons,
correct?
Ages.
How is
I pray for you, brother.
How is the war impacting them?
Well, yeah. Wow. So my sons are anywhere from ages 12 to 24, and how I see it in impacting them is totally different than it impacted us, because at least we had some sense of community and what we would call blackness, whether it was a rhythm or a hipness or a coolness. We had this vibe that everything's going to be all right, no matter what we face, no matter what we go through. But these days, it's a bit different because children have been a bit tricked and somewhat bamboozled because they think they're fully accepted. And when they find out they're not accepted, oh my God. We had,
Amen, my brother.
We had older sons that my wife and I, we tried to talk to them. We tried to explain them, listen, we live in a Caucasian neighborhood. We don't discriminate. The majority of my neighbors are Caucasian. The area that I live in, we live in the suburbs. We try to provide the best in a nice neighborhood. But let me explain something to you. You are still a black man. And they fought us through the teenage years, only after that to go through college and life to realize, like, wow, I hated the fact that you were right. And we were just trying to explain, there's no way for us to really protect you from that. So how I see it affecting the younger generation is that they've assimilated in higher heights than we've assimilated, but they're still not accepted. So really, there's a gray area. So it's like being in war, but it's a psychological warfare. It's like being in war, but you don't know the colors of the opposite team. And people will betray you because of color. People will misuse you because of color. People will judge you because of color. And so for the younger generation, they don't feel accepted. From with the Mike Brown incident in Ferguson, Missouri, from what you're seeing with Freddie Gray in Baltimore, Maryland, from what you're seeing all through from Sandra here in Texas, you're just seeing a myriad of come to the forefront. And it's not that it didn't happen with us; it was more blatant. You understood it a little bit better. You could spot it out. But especially now with social media, not only is it magnified, but you're seeing true feelings come out. Anytime you can have someone like, and I'm not saying that I'm for or against Donald Trump. I'm saying anytime you can have someone like Donald Trump make specific statements that were not taken out of proportion, that were direct in nature as it relates to Hispanics, women, immigrants, as it relates to, okay, the Black Lives protester, he probably deserved to be roughed up. Those kinds of things do not help. So it's all in your face with this young generation now, and it's just all out there because everybody has a voice. So,
Well, just to add on to what you're saying, one of my longtime contributors, a gentleman named Victor Unlimited, he coined a phrase a long time ago. Some of what you're talking about is the illusion of inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry for being long, fellas. It just
Take your time.
Take your time, bro.
It's different. A friend of mine called me yesterday, and he was talking to me about the Willie Lynch letters. Now, I read them in college early on, and he said, "Man, have you ever read that?" I tried to get him to read it, 20 years ago, but it's affecting him differently now with his family. And this is not something to say that all white or Hispanics or anybody are racist, but there are some people out there. Let me say this and I'll wrap it up. My neighbor across the street blessed us so much. My son got an athletic scholarship and he was playing football in Arkansas. The moment my neighbor across the street found out, my neighbor said, and God bless my neighbor. He's a Caucasian. He's a white male. He said, you tell your son to be careful. I'm from Arkansas. This is how they think. This is what he's going to go through. This is what he's going to experience. And so my son was less likely to hear it from us. But because we said, Mr. So-and-so said it across the street, he was in tune to hear it better. Because for some reason, the illusion of inclusion, because of his friends here, who were majority white or Hispanic, had him thinking everything is fine and you're one of us. We are never one of them. I'm sorry, you're still black in America. It shouldn't exist, but it just does. And that, thank the Lord, blessed and saved my son's soul throughout the various incidents that he experienced in I won't say that racist state, but let's just say in some racist places that he was in within that state. Okay, that's enough.
Well,
All right, Tony, Dr. Ed.
go ahead, Dr. Ed.
Yeah, I think the illusion of inclusion is real. I think that it is unfortunate, but it is a reality that we have to deal with. I think that in order, and how is it impacting our youth is very significantly. A lot of the acting out that we see happening in schools, let's take it back a step, in homes, then in schools and in the community at large, is largely due to that illusion of inclusion and also the absence of self-awareness, be that based on, like Vershar pointed out, having been equipped, his son having been equipped with that knowledge, even if he didn't totally perceive it, he at least had the seed planted. If you never plant the seed, then nothing can grow from that. And so I think a lot of times when you look at nowadays, we have babies raising babies, I call it. So how is it impacting our youth today? We got kids out here that would rather cuss you out than say hello if you speak to them when you walk down the street. That'll look at you like, when I was growing up, any adult that I passed was a viable candidate to spank my behind if they caught me out of line. In this day and age, most adults are afraid of the kids because they know if you say something to somebody's kid, you might get a cap bust in your behind. And that's really unfortunate. But I mean, it's a generational shift that is present, that is very relevant. And I mean, having grown up on the west side of Detroit, I'm going to be totally transparent. I used to go home and feel relatively comfortable. I don't. I mean, I'm not even gonna lie. And it's not because I'm a sellout. They don't have anything to lose in some urban areas, and a lot of times it's because there are no jobs, there are no means to survive, there are no viable exposures to constructive thinking to help build them up, to establish them to want to grow, and not catering to the stereotypes. That's where I grew up. When I say from Detroit, I really grew up in Detroit, not Flint, not Ann Arbor. I grew up on the west side of Detroit, and it was hard. Core, back when it was good, when Motown was booming, was when I grew up there, and I watched the decline take place. I have been back home, but when I go home, and it will always be home because I'm very proud to be a product of Detroit City. I'm a beacon or an example that everything that come out of Detroit ain't bad, contrary to some of the stereotypes that you hear, which are not true, because there's some awesome people that come out of Detroit that have come out of Detroit. And there's some awesome people in Detroit right now doing some amazing things, but that's not what's popular. So you don't see it or hear it in the mainstream. So that's what's really plaguing our youth. To get back to the actual question, I apologize, is we're bombarded with all of this imagery that's not a true reflection of reality. When you got kids that are out here willing to stand, and parents that finance kids standing in line to buy a pair of $200 Jordans, there's something fundamentally wrong. And I mean, I don't know, even if I had it, I wouldn't pay $200 for a pair of Jordans. You know, and I make a living to the point that I could, but I mean, I think so. There's a number of impacts to our kids, and I think a lot of it, there's no one right or wrong answer. I think there's a myriad of things that are oftentimes a result of that illusion of inclusion that has been stated. So I totally concur with that. And I think it's up to us to start the process of turning that ship around and get our people back in the game.
Good stuff. I'd like to welcome some other people who have joined the conversation. IA Lewis also joined the conversation at Charlotte Sos 360. We also have at Wake Up Better, and also a gentleman who I do co-host the show every second Monday, part of a series called From Black Men Hypermasculinity to Black Men Masculinity. Dr. Charles Corp, who's on the show tonight, joining things in. So good stuff. Thanks everyone to join the conversation. We'll go for a few more minutes because I already see people saying, hoping there's a part 2. Yes, there will be a part 2. No worries. There will be a part 2.
Hey, Dr. Bob, before you change the conversation, can I have my 2 cents? Can I put my 2 cents in?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to come to you. No worries.
No problem. I was just sitting here and I was thinking about my son, who's in college, and one of the things I tried to break a stigma was the sense of entitlement. And sometimes we have a generation that think that they're entitled to things. And I know my son is like, well, if this is that, I'm going to get it anyway, without thinking about all the preparation or the work behind. So I had to get that straight in his mind a little bit, that entitlement is nothing. You don't own anything, and you're not going to get anything just because of your good looks and what your name is. You got to work hard. And then we got a generation that also continues to think that as parents, we don't know nothing. That's the way my son has told me. That's old thinking. Call him old school thinking. And when he comes to realize, he's in college now, he's come to realize that old thinking is what is really still works, because he had the nerve to come back and say something to me like, "No, Dad, it's just my first year in college. I'm away from home, and all the stuff that we talked about beware, watch your environment, who you're around, and people you talk to. Things happen, and even your own kind, you have to be aware of what's going on." He said that old thinking, "Oh man, everybody cool, everybody's down. Man, I'm a good cat. This person," and he got something stolen from him, and he felt like, "Oh my God, it was the end of the world." So we have this sense of we have to make our kids understand that, yeah, this old bag, I call myself the old bag sometimes, still got a little bit of sense. And the world that we live in the early 70s, and 80s, and 90s, and now in the 2000s, it's because he's a 90 baby. He think that things have changed. It just has a different color. It still it has the same perspective. It just got a different color. See, when we didn't have all the video games, we had Atari, if you could afford it.
Yeah.
And that was a distraction from a book, the same way video games are a distraction from books. We didn't have all the Michael Jordans until the late 90s, but we had to make sure we can survive to walk from the house to the bus stop to keep your clothes looking good. So it's just a different mass. And he's found to realize that some of the old stuff still exists.
Yeah.
When you have that conversation. So as parents, regardless if you don't want to, you still have to give your kids that conversation about the real world that you came from or what you're in and what really exists. Because when they experience it, they can't say they didn't know what happened. We try to tell other kids pull up their pants and look like a respectable young man. You can't even hardly do that now because, "Oh, you ain't my daddy," or "You ain't buy my clothes," and it's come to a harsh reality that you can't even tell a kid to do the right thing because they feel that because you're not tied to them to lead them in the right direction, you can't help them. But when the police pull them aside and do the right thing that's according to their job description, the first thing they want to say is, "Oh, the reason why you did this is because I'm Black." So I try to make myself understand you're not entitled to anything other than death. Where any given moment God could take our life. We're entitled to death. And while we're here on this earth, we're entitled to walk upright and follow the rules and regulations of the law. And no one is above the law. No one is entitled to something different. So we got to teach our kids that entitlement and hard work is where it's at. And we do have experience. I wish our parents would never stop talking to our kids, no matter what age they may get, about things in the real world, because they have a mirage of things that really don't happen in this new generation.
So let me just build on that, in that point for the gentlemen here that have sons. Have you had the talk with them?
Well, I don't have sons. I have daughters, but I'd be remiss if I didn't address part of what Tony said. I agree that we need to be engaged. I agree that we have wisdom of yesteryear, but we also have to be mindful of the vast number of extra distractions, attention pullers that our children have. And so one of the things that I discovered in studying millennials is a lot of them, when your son said, well, you just old school or whatever, they really believe that. They really believe we're idiots. and they have a very different mindset than we grew up with. We were teachable. And whether we feared it or we were scared of the repercussions, we actually did acquiesce and receive learning. This new generation of millennials are demanding that we give them respect, which may sound crazy because we all know that respect is earned. And that entitlement mentality that you touch on is real, because a lot of these youngsters, they have this entitlement mentality without understanding that it warrants work ethic, it warrants being trustworthy, it warrants earning that ability to be in that place. But I respectfully have to add that what we grew up on is not working for our kids today, because they are a totally different animal. So while there is value and wisdom in the knowledge that we bring and we were reared with, we can't get it twisted. In order to be effective and be able to reach this new generation, we're going to have to change our approach. We're going to have to be creative. And believe it or not, we're going to have to understand what is important to them. And I got a really good friend that is a specialist in child psychology and does a lot of studies, and we talk on occasion. But it really threw me aback at first as well, because I was kind of one of those do as I say, not as I do type of people, until I began to realize that while they may not listen to us, they 100% emulate what they see. And so until I began to understand the benefit of changing my behavior, recently went to my own daughter. I have 3 daughters. And when their mom passed a couple of years ago, I sold my house and moved in with them so that not to disrupt their life, because we were divorced. But what I learned a lot in about a 3-year period about being emotionally available, and the fact that as much wisdom and as much as I tried to pour into them, I was missing it because I wasn't listening as much as I was trying to talk. And there's a reason that we have 2 ears and 2 eyes. We need to be more, yes, we've been around the block. Yes, we've been through some stuff, but we also, with this current generation, have to be more attentive to the things that are important to them as well, without compromising our position as parents. We can't be their friend. I'm not suggesting that. We still need to be a parent, but we have to be strategic in listening to what's really interested in what they're not saying, because they don't talk. They'll text you like crazy, but which is a whole different dynamic we didn't have to deal with. We didn't have to deal with social media when we were growing up. Our kids today, heck, I saw recently they took cursive writing out of school. They're taking away a lot of the fundamentals because, heck, they on them stupid devices. I mean, I've even been in the house with my daughters in the same house, and we're texting each other.
I'm gonna cut it right there. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get someone else in, and Vershard, since you've been on the longest, I'm definitely gonna have you leave. But thank you so much for making the conversation better. There will be a part 2, so keep an eye in the next. Definitely within the next month, we'll maybe do this as an ongoing series. So thank you for coming on first. Thank you for making the program better, and all the best to you and your family, especially the 4 sons.
Dr. Vibe, I think I'll volunteer.
All right,
I'll still hang out, but I'll jump out of the seat. I think I saw a couple of people trying to get in.
Yeah.
Well, I know that IA Lewis wants to come in. So
Okay.
IA Lewis, if you want to come in, I've opened up a seat for you. We go. And if anyone else wants to come in, just holler me up on the side and I'll get you in.
Great.
IA Lewis, what is up, IA?
Greetings. Thanks for having me.
Always
I've
a
been
pleasure.
listening for about the last 15 minutes in this good conversation. And I'm a parent. I'm an entrepreneur and a parent, so I got double whammy. And I think the problem that we face in this generation is that there's a lack of parenting. Because for a number of different reasons, we trying to build a career, trying to run a business, for whatever reason. And the problem that the young people are facing is that a lot of parents aren't being parents. They are providers. They are protectors. They're doing what they think they should do, but they're not parenting. And I give you an example. When you're running a business, as you know, and you're doing a lot of different things, you can neglect your children. We work hard so that they have food to eat, clothes to wear, and all the trimmings, but we don't spend the time that we need. And then once they get older, here we come after the fact that somebody else has done raised your child. And now you're competing with, like the brother said, we got social media, we got all these other distractions that's coming along. And that's the issue, because we were neglectful for so long. And then now as they got older, we want to step in and be parents. So their mindset has already formed or who they're going to be. And that's where I see the problem is. And so I would suggest to anybody who's a parent, start when they're young, start when they're a baby. Condition their mindset. Show them the way. That's our job as parents. We're supposed to lead and guide and direct at a young age. So when they turn 16 and the voice gets deeper, their body starts changing and all these things are coming at them, they have a strong foundation. And that's where I see that the children are suffering from, they're casualties. They're casualties of war, because we say we don't want our children to go through what we went through. So that's why we work 10 times harder, so they don't have to work as hard. But at the same time, we're not being parents. We're not giving direction. We're not giving instruction. And a lot of cases, we wait too late. And so that's what I would put out there to everybody who's under the sound of my voice, who can hear me. Raise your child from a baby. Condition them. Love your child. Spend time with your child. Even if you're not in it to be able in your child's life on a regular basis, but put in the time that you can. Because like you say, they do as they see you do, not as you say do. Now, if the child sees you smoking, child sees you drinking, child sees you doing crazy stuff, don't be mad when they do it. And
we emulate, we replicate what we emulate.
Exactly. And to answer the question earlier, how do we make a difference in their lives? First, we love ourselves. Because if I don't love me, if I don't feel good about me, how can I feel good about them? And they say, well, that's your child. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how many parents have children that don't love their kids.
Good stuff. Well, on that note, I'm going to wind it down because we're going to do a part 2. IA Lewis, thank you always for coming on, whether it's on the side or coming in to the live feed. You always make the conversation better.
Thank you. I appreciate the platform. Appreciate you having me.
Always a pleasure. So I'm going to let you go and have a good one. And everyone else jumped off. I was going to say thanks very much to everybody for the conversation tonight, and really appreciate it. I hope I shouted out everyone who came on. Thank you so much. Also, a big shout out to Claude Diamond, who actually filled out the survey. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask a very quick conversation piece here. If you would like to see a part 2, can you type a 7 in the side? If you'd like to see a part 2, because I think we just got started with this one. Thank you, I.A. Lewis. Thank you, Monty. Thank you. Can't wait for part 2. Very good. Claude Diamond. Okay. Absolutely. The pleasure's mine. All right. So what we're going to do, I'm going to look at my schedule. So definitely within the next 3 weeks, maximum, I'll have a part 2. And my goal is to not only continue the conversation, but have different voices come in and share. I did put it out there tonight for people who wanted to come in. Only 1 or 2 people said it, but I have a feeling that after this one, I think, and I actually want, how can I say, a diversity of voices coming into the conversation. I would love to see, and I respect Claude Diamond so much, and he had a lot of great things to add to the conversation tonight. Also, Veronica, if you feel comfortable, I'd love you to come in and enrich, enhance, and educate, and add positive value to the conversation. So we're going to shut it down here. I'd like to say I'm Dr. Vibe. I'm host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. You can catch me on Blab. You can catch me at the Good Men Project. I've been a regular contributor there for the last 2.5, 3 years. You can catch me at my website. I'll give you the website address. So that's my website address. Again, if you have 2 minutes of your precious time, I'd really appreciate, I'll give a link here. You can fill out a 2-minute survey of what you thought about today's conversation, any suggestions you may have on other subjects you'd like me to bring. And it's right across the board. I just don't talk about subjects for blacks and men. I do it right across the board because to me, knowledge is color and gender blind. So that's the way I think. So there's the link if you want to do the survey. What else is coming up? In the next few weeks, are there different conversations coming up? Also, too, are we having no, we're not having a show tomorrow because Askia planned something else. I'll be emailing you, Mr. Wake Up Better, tomorrow to see where we can do a reschedule date. So no problem. So as always, I like to say you're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles and you're a solution for someone's problem. I'm going to leave with a quote for men especially. And this has been right across the board, regardless of color, race, creed. Here we go. Men, taking care of yourself is the best gift you can give those who love you. So I'll say it again for men. Taking care of yourself, man, is the best gift you can give those who love you. So on that, I'd like to say, God bless, peace be well, keep the faith, and good night. I'll probably do a little bit of a short after show.